Friday/weekend headlines that we got to get through. The big one is the Glasnow trade is finalized and the extension is finalized.
Yeah.
4 for 111 for a guy that's averaging, I think, fewer than 70 innings per season over the last 4 full seasons. We'll dive into that a little bit more. It was Tyler Glasnow and Manny Margot going from the Rays to the Dodgers in return for Ryan Pepiot and Johnny DeLuca. We also got a hit on the Kansas City freaking Royals actually buying into this thing. Max Scherzer is out for the front half of the year. It looks like he may be back by the All-Star break, which is when DeGrom and Tyler Mahle are hoping to get back. Lourdes Gurriel is back in Arizona. Yoshinobu Yamamoto update. And we're going to play GM for the Rangers and the Seattle Mariners. The Rangers and the Mariners have already kind of gotten a head start on the GM thing this offseason, but the Mariners are going backwards. Like, we're catching them at the point where they've taken 2 steps backwards, and we're going to try and make sure they take 4 steps forward. And I don't know if Jerry has that in mind, Jerry DiPoto, but like, we'll see. Aram, nice win for your Finns.
Yeah.
I've got a question. That Kadarius Toney like bobble, I'm sure you saw that. Mahomes threw it to Kadarius Toney and he bobbled it twice and then it was picked. Like, that cannot be on the quarterback. And like, they're never going to adjust that being an interception on the quarterback, but that just, we can't view that as a mistake on Pat Mahomes.
No, I feel like football, we talk about how like pitcher wins don't matter. I feel like there's got to be like a trend. I'm not as in the weeds in football, but I feel like there's got to be some sort of trend of like amongst the analytics community that like interceptions aren't a telling stat. Obviously, like if it's a 30 interception season,
Right.
It's telling. But in terms of like 16 picks versus 12 picks versus 10 picks, like I feel like it might be one of those things that people in the football community probably don't pay as much attention to as they used to.
And I know
I
it
think that's an
is.
exact reason why.
I know it is, but like, to our blind eye or somewhat blind eye, like a guy with 5 picks is more valuable than a guy with 10 picks.
Yeah.
And that's just one that Mahomes shouldn't have.
Yeah. No, I mean, that guy's been giving them some trouble the last few weeks for sure.
Bizarro. I told you right before we hit the record button that I did not deem it worthy of much airtime that Jack Flaherty signed with the Detroit Tigers for a year. Is that fair? Did I make a good editorial decision?
Yeah, it's a good editorial decision. I will say real quick, like 15-second thought on that as you just brought it up. It is a good spot for him to try to reclaim some of his value, given that, he could probably outperform, some of the underlying metrics in that big ass stadium in Comerica. And, it's cool to see the Tigers just try to add some more able bodies to that rotation. And, now they have a lot of different options. So I think it's a good opportunity for both sides. And if they suck again next year, flip him if he's anything.
2 things that aren't, I don't know, affected by ballpark that I'm really looking at with Jack Flaherty are innings pitched and fastball velocity, and those cannot be aided at Comerica Park. So I'm really curious how those 2 things kind of come about. And I think that those are the 2 questions for me.
I mean, that's what it's all going to be about, right? So I'm rooting for him. I am, because he is still young. And I mean, it seems like a good landing spot, but I can't believe it feels like since we last recorded over the weekend, just so many different things happened that this is really going to be one of those headline episodes where we're just going to bang through as many as we can and get to as many things as possible.
For sure. Of course, the Just Baseball Show is presented by BetMGM. Use that promo code in our episode description. I know Peter has the whole read, but we're very thankful for BetMGM in this holiday season. Let's jump into Glasnow and Manny Margot going from Tampa to the Dodgers for Ryan Pepiot and Johnny DeLuca. And pretty much what the Rays did is they swapped big money and 2 years of service for 12 years of service between Pepiot and DeLuca. Johnny DeLuca is a guy that we've talked about on the call-up recently and on the Just Baseball Show as a guy that has a bunch of tools, had a really solid showing in Major League Baseball last year in a very limited sample, but is the classic Dodger farmhand that is really good at every level and climbs 1 level a year and is really good in high A in 21 and then double A in 22 and then triple A in 23. And then you just start knocking on the door. Think Ryan Noda with Oakland. Think Michael Busch right now too. It's just station to station, he's been good. James Outman is a perfect example. And that guy has made himself an everyday player for the LA Dodgers moving forward. DeLuca, I'm not saying that he has the insane tools that Outman does. I don't know if he's an everyday player, but that's a good get for Tampa. And Pepio, if the flashes we saw last year are there to stay at all, that's a great get in this Glasnow Margot deal.
Yeah, and I feel like this is a great landing spot for Pepiot, who, really has always had the fastball changeup and started to see some improvements with a cutterish slider that he throws that maybe the Rays can kind of get a little bit more out of that because they seem to be able to preach, that anything breaking horizontal seems to be improved and accentuated when you get to Tampa. And I always think it's a little bit lazy whenever Tampa or certain teams add a guy and they just say, "Oh, congratulations, he's going to be the best ever." But Pepiot, it's never been a question about talent. It's just been about putting it together. And over his last 8 appearances of the season last year at the big league level, he really put it together in the command department. He filled up the strike zone at a 67% clip. He threw his fastball for a strike 68% of the time. He threw his changeup for a strike 68% of the time. And then this cutter was effective for him, but it could be better. And if that pitch gets better for him, he's a middle rotation arm. So yeah, is he going to give you flashes of Glasnow, who, when healthy, can be a top 10 pitcher of the game? Probably not, but he could give you more innings. He's under control for more years. And, we knew that they were never going to retain Glasnow. So given how much Glasnow costs, in 1 year, and given that probably negated some of the value, Pepiot with years of control, is it 5 years of control or 4?
I think so.
Now?
I think it's 5.
Yeah, 4 or 5 is extremely valuable. And then DeLuca, I mean, you look at what Manny Margot did the last few years. I know he's been banged up at points, and 2022 is a little better, but you can pretty much average out 1 point whatever in F4, right? A win and change over the last 4 years. I think Johnny DeLuca can do that very easily with good defense. He can play all 3 spots. He crushes lefties. I think he's going to fit in and be able to take some of those left on left at bats from Josh Lowe, be able to fill in if somebody gets hurt. And I think he ends up giving them the same, if not more, production and value than Manny Margot, who cost them $12 million. So I think that side of it is really interesting too. And I think the Rays, all in all, yeah, you lose your frontline guy, but they're hoping to get some other guys back this year. Shane Baz, there's some other really talented arms. We'll see it with the injury, I think, situations for some of their other really, really talented arms is kind of wait and see. But
yeah,
I think they're in a pretty good spot given, the fact that they didn't have much to work with in terms of value of years of control and cost with the Tyler Glasnow. I thought they made out well.
Yeah, no, Boz should be back. Taj Bradley should have ample confidence coming into this year because he went through his trials and tribulations in 2023. Here's to hoping those are in the rear view. We think that guy is exceptionally talented, and Bradley can be really good moving forward, and that may start in 2024. The wait and see guys are Springs and Rasmussen. McClanahan is likely to miss the entire year. That's my understanding of that. He may try and come back for an October push, but that is being incredibly optimistic.
Yeah.
So Rasmussen is the interesting one to me because I don't think it was another Tommy John. I think it was an internal brace done because it was a frayed UCL. It was not a completely torn UCL. So his timeline should be a little bit better. They do part with Glasnow, who, like you mentioned, was their ace. He's coming off of a career high in innings, which is still, I think that was slightly over 120. I don't have the number in front of me. By the way, Pepio, 5 years of service remaining. That takes him through his age 30 season that the Rays have him under team control. Tyler Glasnow is making 25 mil this year, and then he signed for an additional 4 years and $111 million. So you take that 4 for 111. Glasnow is going to make $27.5 million a year. And again, the average innings pitched for Tyler Glasnow over the last 4 full seasons, I'm not counting 2020, 68 and 2/3. This is a crazy gamble by the Dodgers, and I'm going to call it a gamble. And this should make a lot of injury-prone starters do backflips, seeing Glasnow get this. Are injury-prone starters as talented as Tyler Glasnow? No. There really aren't pitchers that are as talented as Tyler Glasnow. That guy is on the count of one hand when it comes to sheer talent in a starting rotation. But when it comes to availability and WAR accumulation, this guy's nowhere near the top because he's been unavailable. And he still got $111 million. They're paying for a what if right now. I thought this was a crazy gamble. and a not very Andrew Friedman move.
Yeah, usually the big splashes are the Mookies, right?
Freddie
Or the
Freeman, who
guys, the
plays every
Otanis.
game. The
Yeah,
Otani, who plays every game, even if he is TJ'd up.
yeah. That's where it's interesting. Look, I'm never gonna. It's not my money, so I don't care. But when we're talking about deferring money to be able to go add other guys, and then half of said deferred money is going to go to Tyler Glasnow, that's okay. But when half of the deferred money for half of the duration that the money is being deferred, meaning that you're committing to 5 years here of Glasnow, is the deal. That's where it's a little bit more surprising. And again, the Dodgers are rolling on the upside. They want to see if it all can come together and they can win a World Series that way. But I was trying to think what he would get on the open market, and I might be wrong. There's no way to know. We're kind of just speaking on what ifs. But is a team giving him 5 years on the open market? Maybe. I guess, but I feel like that's probably close to the best offer he gets, right? Is something along the lines of this. I get that part of the trade was, it being contingent on an extension. And I know that that was important, and you can't really put a price tag on that because, once you get out into the open market, anything can happen. So that was the help that the Dodgers were able to get out of this deal. But, just 5 years at that is crazy, because if he does, and I hope he does, and obviously the game is better when Glasnow is healthy and
Yes.
throwing, but if he does struggle to stay on the field, in year one or even in year two, you're going to be staring down the barrel of almost $30 million a year, or roughly 30 a year over the last 3 years, where you're like, man, like this is really hard to justify, and you're going to regret it. And then beyond that, the last year of the deal is so it would be 2 more years, I guess, because then the last year of the deal is a club option at 30 million in 2028 when he's 34 years old. And if they decline that, it converts to a player option at $21 million, 21 and a half to be exact. So the interesting side of that is, if he's really, really struggling to stay healthy, he's obviously going to just opt in at 21 million and take that as well. So you really have him on the hook for another year after that. That's the interesting side of it. So it's 2024, 2025, 2026, 2027, then 2028 is that club option that really does convert into a player option that, if the contract's a disaster, is not going to be a great deal for you.
Yeah, baseball is more fun when Glasnow is on the hill. Hitching Ninja has more to work with on Twitter when Tyler Glasnow is on the hill. Let's get that out of the way. He's not 27 anymore. He's 30.
He's 30.
And I wonder how this ages. And I know the answer is Glasnow when I say this, but I just want you to think about 2024 for a moment. In 2024, who do you want to pay $25 million to? Tyler Glasnow or Sonny Gray? Moving forward, it's Glasnow. If I were to give one of those guys a 3-year deal, it's Glasnow, because Gray is already 34. Glasnow's 30. Yeah. But 2024, who do you want to give 25 mil to? The guy that just threw 170 innings, or the guy that threw 120 but has better talent?
I mean, man, it's a really interesting conversation, because beyond that, I mean, Glasnow was really good through stretches, but he wasn't perfect either. He had 6 earned runs, in one start. He had a 7-run, 4 earned in another start. He had 6 earned runs against Baltimore again. I mean, like, there were some outings where he got roughed up a little bit. Overall, the numbers cumulatively were solid, and he had some dominant outings to offset that. 14 punchies here, 12 punchies there. But if he's not absolutely dominant when he's on the field, then you're going to have a little bit more of that question too, because if he's giving you 130 innings of a 3-4 with big strikeout numbers, like, that's not great. I'd rather have 180 innings of a 3-6. Yeah. No, but potentially 3-4. I think Sonny can give you that. But even if it's lesser, like, I'd rather have 180 innings of a 3-6. And I'm looking at this Dodgers rotation, and they need a Kyle Gibson, bro.
Dude, like, they need somebody.
They need someone to just eat some innings, because you look at that offense, and I mean, they could get 5 innings of 3 to 4 run ball from whatever auto-generated pitcher you want to name and throw in there, and they'll probably win most of those games, or at least a fair portion of them. So I obviously think it's a great move, because it's not my money. And if they're going to spend a lot more money, who cares? The upside here is enormous for a team that, outside of 2020, has really struggled to, I think, get over that last little step in the postseason. Glasnow can be the guy that does that. Also, they don't have that clear-cut ace next year. Of course, Walker can be that, but he hasn't thrown in years. So like it's also one of those things where it's like, let's have multiple guys who are capable of being an ace and hope that one of them doesn't. If they both do it, then we're in really good shape. So, you have the upside potential this year to have Walker pitching like an ace and Glasnow pitching like an ace. That's a great scenario to potentially have.
Yeah.
And I think they're just trying to put as many irons in the fire as possible to have that upside now, because they know next year they'll have Ohtani and maybe May and other guys back, and it'll really come together. But they need to take a shot at some upside in this coming season, because Freeman isn't getting any younger either. Neither is Mookie. And you're not going to find as much of an upside option as Tyler Glasnow outside of Yamamoto, who we know they're in on, and some of these other top flight free agents.
Yeah. So best case scenario is they get to the NLDS and they're running at a 4-man rotation of a healthy ace Walker Buehler, a healthy ace Tyler Glasnow, Bobby Miller, who took another huge step in his sophomore season, and then Clayton Kershaw being piggybacked by Emmett Sheehan, a healthy Kershaw. That's best case scenario. Worst case scenario is Glasnow's not healthy. Walker is already, approaching 170 innings after he's missed the last 2 seasons pretty much. Bobby
Yeah.
Miller has some of those young pitcher, issues exposed. And then you've got Kershaw, who's just not right, coming off shoulder surgery. There's a realistic world where I see both best case scenario and worst case scenario. And if something falls in the middle, I just don't know what Glasnow looks like in that equation.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're full of bias. I have a ton of confidence in Walker pitching like an ace.
Yeah.
We have a ton of bias. I have a ton of confidence in Clayton Kershaw coming back and muscling his way to a 2-4. That's what he's done for the last half decade. But Glasnow is the wild card here. And I know everybody wanted to immediately stamp the Dodgers as, oh, this super team. It's unfair what they're doing. Pump the brakes on that a little bit. The Glasnow thing raises some concerns.
Yeah, I think it gives you monstrous upside, which they needed in 24. But this thing isn't wrapped up, and we talked about that, in the other episode, where it's just like Peter and I were just saying, like, enough, relax. If they get Yamamoto and maybe another piece, like, we'll talk about it potentially being a super team. But you still have a back half of the order that's Outman, Chris Taylor, Jason Hayward, Gavin Lux, and then a rotation that has the risk of falling apart. So I mean, it's not some impenetrable, unbeatable team. So it's going to be interesting. I'm very fascinated to see what the next moves are, and I think they need to offset some of this risk with an innings eater. And I do wonder if they're going to go out and try to find one of those innings eaters.
And I wonder who that is. Is Manny Margot going to be on the bench on opening day? I think it'll really come down to Margot versus Michael Busch, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe Margot versus Vargas.
I wonder if they're going to make another trade, because it's just still like I'm trying to see how they're going to continue to create room in general. But I think it would be Margot versus Vargas. And if Vargas doesn't take a step forward, I've always liked him as a prospect, that I could see them going with the vet and Margot, and they seem to get the most out of guys like Margot, putting him in positions to succeed and kind of protecting them, like we saw with Hayward. And maybe a platoon with Hayward in a way makes some sense, with Hayward taking the bulk of it. I think Margot hitting lefties and playing some defense, and he can play all 3 spots. I'd expect him to be able to grab that roster spot. I think he's a little bit more valuable to them defensively than a Vargas, and they don't really care if there's an offensive difference there.
No, not at all. The Kansas City Royals are kind of fascinating right now, and they've dished out over $100 million in free agent money to Michael Wacha, who just signed 2 years for $32 million, Seth Lugo, who got 3 for $45, Hunter Renfroe, who got 2 for $13, Chris Stratton, Will Smith, and Garrett Hampson, the Will Smith reliever, not the Will Smith catcher. But that's a lot of buy-in from a team that was probably the second worst in baseball, only ahead of the Oakland Athletics last year. And I know there was a piece in the Athletic kind of talking about the window that they see with Bobby Witt as well. But I do like this. If there's any division that can just crumble and the Royals can win it at 87 wins, it's this one. And I think they're building a team that 87 is not a far reach at all from.
It's not impossible. And that's all that you need at this stage for these young guys. I think that there's a ton of value to just having a 23-year-old Bobby Witt Jr. 26-year-old Vinny Pascantino and some of these other young guys, 26-year-old Cole Reagans, starting the season, going to camp, MJ Melendez as well. Like those guys going to camp knowing, hey, we have a chance this year, right? We have a chance to play for something. We could maybe sneak into the division and maybe we can hang around the wild card. It's good for these young players to be able to show up and have a little bit more buy-in. And I'm not saying these guys aren't bought in. They've been trying to prove themselves and establish themselves as young players, but as a team, right? Trying to win ball games. If you watch Royals games last year, these young guys all like each other a lot, and they're all really fun personalities. MJ Melendez is a cool dude. Bobby Witt's a very likable player. Vinny Pascantino is the man. And, you could tell that this core like really likes to play together. And now they have this maybe just pipe dream, but realistic, at least in some sense, pipe dream that they can win something and play with nothing to lose and have a little bit more of a shot. I think that's huge for the development of Bobby Witt Jr., who should never play a game in another uniform if you have any control over that, if you're the Kansas City Royals, and continue to build these guys up.
Yeah. I'm looking at the projected starting lineup right now on Roster Resource on Fangraphs, and it is going to be Sal Perez catching, Vinny at first, Michael Massey at second, Bobby Witt at short, Maikel Garcia at third, who I know that there's a certain facet of baseball media that has really bought into Maikel Garcia, and I know that Foolish Baseball is one of those. MJ Melendez in left, Kyle Isbell in center, Hunter Renfroe in right, Nelson Velasquez DHing, and a bench of Drew Waters, Dairon Blanco, who flies, Garrett Hampson, and Freddie Fermin. That is not the best product in baseball, don't get it twisted, but it is a very enjoyable product. And I think you can have a good time watching Royals baseball next year, which I had a good time watching them this year, and they lost 100 games. This is a way better product. And you look at the rotation, like who were you relying on before Reagans got there? They were sitting ducks every night when it came to starting pitching. But right now it's Reagans, Waka, Seth Lugo, Brady Singer, Jordan Lyles. There's one duck there. Everybody else, I'm kind of interested to watch.
Yeah. I think that rotation has the potential to be more than fine. I mean, Lugo could be a mid-threes guy. Waka could be a mid-threes guy. Reagans, I mean, it looks like he should at least be a mid-threes guy, but could be even better than that. Singer was a weird season from him, but we know he can be a mid to high threes guy. And then Lyles is your 5 innings eater. Like, that's fine. So, I mean, he was brutal last year, but you're hoping he can be your number 5 innings eater. That's enough. And maybe they can go get one more arm. Maybe some of these other young arms finally put it together. I think that you don't have a reliance on some of the Daniel Lynches of the world, right? That you don't have to worry about that as much now, which is huge. And if you get something from them, it's an added bonus. I think the really interesting thing too with this team is they went out and got Matt Sauer in the Rule 5 draft. I really like that pickup there. We talked about that on the call up. He could potentially start, and I think that there's a chance he could be a better option than Lyles. I think he could be a mid to high 4s at the very worst rotation piece, or a really solid reliever. So I think they've kind of put this together nicely. Nick Anderson's an upside arm in the bullpen. You got Will Smith, as you mentioned. Stratton they add to the bullpen. Carlos Hernandez has shown some flashes. Like, they put together a bullpen that's not the worst in the world either. It was horrible last year through stretches. So I'm interested in this team. And I think with how weak the division has kind of looked, the Twins cutting some payroll, I think the Tigers kind of see that, and that's why they're going forward a little bit. I think a lot of these other teams here that have been basement dwellers feel like there's something here where maybe it's attainable. And I thought it was really interesting that the Royals felt so strongly about that they were considering, reportedly, according to Ken Rosenthal, swapping Vinny Pascantino in a deal for Jesus Luzardo from the Marlins. And, Luzardo comes with less control. Pascantino is a first baseman, though, so it's a unique deal in itself. But I'm personally glad the Marlins didn't do it. I love Vinny, but it shows that the Royals are ready to part with some players that it would hurt to part with if it helps them win now and if they can continue to strengthen this team for the next couple of years.
100%. A couple of guys that I forgot about when it came to starting pitching depth, too. Anthony Veneziano had, strong year in AAA, so he could. I'm just thinking about guys that could be better than Jordan Lyles, and Veneziano is one of those guys. Daniel Lynch is one of those guys too. I saw him throw pretty well in the Dominican Winter League, which was interesting. And then Alec Marsh, I know that you have been higher than most on Marsh.
Yeah,
but
I love the stuff.
But like he could still be better than Jordan Lyles.
Very possible. It's got way better stuff.
Yeah. A lot of unknown with this other deal. How do you think the fit's going to be in Arizona for Lourdes Gurriel Jr.?
And I think they could make a World Series run with him.
You think
Uh,
so?
yeah.
3 for 42 was the number. Lourdes Gurriel is back in a Snakes uniform. My only thought on Gurriel, because we don't need to examine the fit or predict how it's going to work or anything, because we know, and it's a good one. My only thought was 3 for 42. There are so many teams out there that should be kicking themselves for not offering 3 for 50. This guy's worth it,
Yeah.
and he's 30. He's not 33.
Yeah, it's interesting because he grades out kind of strangely, in terms of metrics defensively, and I think that's you look at the F4 output. Like last year was his best year in an F4 department with a 2.1 F4. Like that's weird. He's always just the metrics have kind of hated him defensively, but then when you watch games, yeah, I'm sure the jumps just aren't great or whatever, but he makes some athletic grabs. He makes some good plays, and I mean, you saw career high in homers last year. I just think it's a safe, solid bat that you can really count on to give you above average offense. And the defense was, I think, as good as it's ever been for him last year. So that's huge too. Maybe he finally started to lock in on that a little bit more. And maybe he figured something out. But whatever it was metrically his best defensive season while hitting a career high in homers. Like, yes, he's 30, but it looks like he's kind of settling in as a vet. And, Yuli Gurriel also kind of had some similar as he got older, really started to put it together, and in his late 30s started to have some of his best seasons. So I think that might have been something that the Diamondbacks identified and said, let's keep this guy for 3 more. And I think it's a very safe deal that I am surprised that other teams did not pony up for. I think they probably figured that he'd be around a little bit longer. And a lot of these teams are kind of waiting till January for those middling deals. It's crazy to call 42 million middling, but it really is at this
That's
point.
where we're at. Yeah.
And the Diamondbacks made a push and said, if you sign it now, we'll give you this. And that was it. And I think it really helps them kind of have a good and clear idea of where they're headed going into 24. And I think it's really good to bring back some of those key guys in that run to try to run it back and try to get back there next year.
Are we officially at NBA money? Like NBA money is one of those where it's like that guy got that much. I don't think we're there yet.
No, not even, I don't even think close. I think NBA money in terms of AAV is the most comical thing in all of sports.
It's crazy. Like Hunter Renfroe, we would be at NBA money if Renfroe got $40 million.
Yes. Yes.
But he got 13.
Yeah.
So
about
okay.
Right.
We're far from it. Yeah, man. Toronto better be prepping a king's ransom for Cody Bellinger, and Seattle better be prepping something amazing. Watching them pass on Lourdes Gurriel. Like those are the two teams where I'm like, that was your guy, and he's gone. What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
So we shall see. One more thing before we get into the Rangers and the Mariners kind of playing GM. Rumor mill, and the only real rumor that we're going to address. It's not a rumor. Yoshinobu Yamamoto had dinner at Steve Cohen's house on Saturday night with David Stearns, Carlos Mendoza, and the pitching coach Jeremy Hefner. Joel Sherman had that. Also, Jim Bowden has sources telling him that the Red Sox and the Giants have offered Yamamoto $300 million plus. This is going to get crazy. I saw teensy rumblings from non-blue check people that the deals could extend to 11 or 12 years. I don't want to believe that yet, but $300 million is a lot of money for a pitcher. That might just be where we're at. $300 million deals for pitchers. Is it Cole and that's it?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I can't think of another $300 million deal. And you know what? I think there's a lot of similarities to Cole in respect to not how they pitch, right? But in terms of durability, knock on wood, but you see what he's done and how flexible and how effortless, the delivery is. I know he's not big, but I again, I think that's overblown to a degree in terms of, height, size, and durability. I think there's a lot more intricate things that play a larger part in pitcher health specifically. And it seems like Yamamoto kind of checks all those boxes. I feel very confident that he can handle a big time workload and do that for the duration of whatever this contract looks like. You think about it, he's 25, 8 years. Teams are going to be willing to go more than that. And I think it's going to be one of those things where it's a bidding war, but in the years, and it wouldn't shock me if it went to 11 or 12 because he's 36 at the end of that. The problem is if it, for whatever reason, it doesn't all translate and he struggles to get acclimated. Now you're on the hook for that long. It seems like there'd have to be some opt-outs there. There'd need to be some mutual options. I don't know. It'd have to be a very unique contract because I think that's a really, really long time for a player that we have yet to see play, in the major leagues.
Yeah.
So I struggle to believe that it pushes past 10. But again, there's been so many things that have just absolutely shocked us. So if it happens, I don't think I would, pass out.
Yeah.
But I would be very surprised if it's more than 10 just based on the lack of precedent and also just based on the fact that he has not played in the major leagues yet. That's a long time to commit to a relatively lower unknown, but still an unknown compared to any other free agent that's going to get that kind of deal.
Yeah, and I will say this does feel like all the major markets are whipping themselves into a frenzy or whipping each other into a frenzy right now, just upping the price, upping the price. And I love this from Jerry Blevins, who does great work. He said, I've been of the mind that Yamamoto will be a Yankee since he was posted, but the longer his free agency lasts, the more I think Cohen prevails. The more Yamamoto pushes for the teams to continue bidding, the more it favors Mets, giving Cohen the chance to sell the franchise and the money. Like sell the franchise to Yamamoto, not sell the franchise. Like I do find that argument valid
Mm-hmm.
because I think Cohen can be presented with any amount from any team and just say, okay, plus 10.
Yep. Yep. And if he seems very bought into this,
Yeah.
right? He seems like
Dinner at his
he
house,
feels like
man.
this.
What do you think
Yeah,
they made?
he feels like Yamamoto can be a difference maker.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see how someone outbids them. I've said the Red Sox is my prediction, but before that, I always was thinking Mets. I think it's one of those two. I don't think the Yankees pull it off. I think it's going to be Red Sox or Mets with a sprinkle of the Giants. But it seems like it's going to be hard to outbid the Mets right now, and now they're doing the courting side of things too.
Yeah.
It's going to be difficult.
Now, if you're hosting Yamamoto in like 4 or 5 of his company, do you order food? Do you have your significant other cook? Like, how do you go about that?
Oof,
I think I order
that's
from like my go-to spot.
I order. I definitely order. Yeah,
Yeah, Italian.
play it safe. Order from the best place. Yeah, easy food that everyone's gonna like. You probably get options. Get a little smorgasbord so you can't go wrong.
That'd be good. Like the
Probably.
Talladega Nights spread where it's like,
Steve was laying in bed the night before thinking about that. Like,
yeah, do you
how do
think
we
he was
want to do
laying in
this?
bed? I don't think he lays in bed. I think he has one of those X chairs that I see on TV and he's got like 3 monitors and I think he probably had 3 different menus pulled up there too.
Very possible.
So yeah, I think it's probably like the Talladega Nights spread where it's like, hey, we thank you for this bountiful harvest of KFC, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, everything like that. So
It's a good
maybe
idea,
they did
actually.
just the true Americana thing.
Yeah.